Susan, I like your background.
That's actually my the background on my computer.
Very nice.
But I don't know how it ended up being my background on the video. I don't know what I did. That's magic. Because it wasn't like that before. Oh well.
I like it. It looks hopeful and springy.
Yeah, well, I guess it's better than the background of my kitchen anyway, so.
Oh, it's the best thing I've seen in days. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly. It would have been good if I did it on purpose, but I didn't.
How many of us have made it in?
Nancy's having trouble.
Yeah. I'm gonna forward her, I'll forward her the link one more time and see if that helps. I'll be right back. So Nancy says she's trying to get into the meeting, but Zoom is not launching for her. Does she need to be admitted, Carol, by someone, or is this open?
Georgette is monitoring who
Oh.
she admits, so.
It hasn't even popped in yet to
Okay.
let her in.
If Zoom isn't launching, I don't think it's a waiting room problem. It sounds like she's having a Zoom issue.
And we just had executive session and she was there, so.
Mm-hmm.
She should be coming in now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
I don't see her again.
Oh, she's here.
There she is. Okay.
I am here. I will start the meeting in just 1 minute. I have something I need to read at the beginning of the meeting because it's a remote participation.
Nancy, for whatever it's worth, you're listed as Megan.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. That happens every time I come in.
Well, it's good to know Megan is using her Zoom.
Right.
There we go. Okay, so I am going to call the meeting to order in just a minute here. I've had a technological glitch that's caused me to have to move things around unexpectedly. Okay, so I am going to call the meeting to order, and we have just returned from executive meeting. And as a preliminary matter, this is, sorry, read this. This is the April 30th, 2020 meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee. My name is Nancy Kavanaugh, and I'm going to ask you to permit that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So I'm going to ask just for Amanda,
Yes.
can you confirm Meg? Meg, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and Jen?
Yes.
Okay, and then I've got Carol
Yes.
and Susan
Yes.
and Jen
Yes.
Carson.
Yes.
Okay, and then we have a number of members of the public who are also here. Staff, so I also did call out the staff. So I'm just anticipated speakers that we have for this evening. Are all of our speakers here? Do we have anybody else speaking that has not been called out? Carol, can you just speak to that?
No, I think everyone who is
Okay.
a participant in the meeting is
Here.
here.
Okay, great. So good evening. This open meeting of the Hopkinton School Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Government Baker's Executive Order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Hopkinton School Committee is convening by Zoom as posted by the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Additionally, the meeting may also be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of the channels or platforms. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Meeting materials. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available through the town's website via the town meeting calendar, unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. I am standing in for our chair, Mina Barath, this evening. Meeting business ground rules. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I, Nancy Kavanaugh, will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will invite board members to provide any comment, questions, or motions. please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. Please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. For items with public comment, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment as follows. I apologize, I do have a barking dog in the background. After members have spoken, I will afford public comment as follows. I will first ask members of the public who wish to speak to identify their names and addresses only. You also may press, there's a raise hand button on that should be accessible through Zoom. Once I have a list of all public commenters, I will call each by name and afford 3 minutes for any comments. Finally, each vote taken in the meeting will be conducted by a roll call. So with that, I would like to call this meeting to order. And I would ask that all those who are here and wish to do so would rise as we say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I'm going to start then and ask if we have any recognitions this evening. Are there, I just want to make sure I can see everyone. Are there any recognitions that we have? Anybody? Okay, so since I am not seeing any recognitions, I'm going to ask if there are any public comments at this time. So, and I'm just going to ask for assistance with Georgette. If you see any hands go up that I'm missing, if you could help me by making sure they're unmuted. Okay. So I do not see any public comment at this period. Does anybody see public comment that I'm missing on the screen? Okay. All right. In that case, we will go forward to our next item on the agenda. Sorry, So the next order of business is the FY20 and 21 budget update, and that's Ms. Rothermere.
Thank you. So I have a presentation that I will share with everyone this evening. So I'll make sure that I am able to share. Let me get to the right place. Try that again. Oh, there it is. Okay, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So tonight I want to give the committee and the public an update as to where we are, not only with the FY20 budget, but looking forward, looking out in terms of everything that is going on now with the district and with the community and with the town, what we're looking at. So as you can see, the beginning page, I have given you some puzzle pieces because there are a lot of things that are now broken apart that we have to figure out how to put together. So again, this is a familiar slide I shared with you earlier in terms of the changing landscape of education. Basically, all the school buildings were closed originally until April 6th. The buildings were cleaned and sterilized, and the education at that time was to prevent regression. Then there was another order by the governor that school buildings were to stay closed until May 4th. Buildings were then put into an unoccupied mode, and there was a switch in education to remote instruction of new material. Then following that was another executive order by the governor that all schools would be closed for the year. So this began a process of looking at currently our fiscal year this year, FY20. Now, how do we close out this fiscal year budget? In addition, the FY21 budget had already been passed by both the school committee and the select board, but now everything is really up in the air. So the FY21 budget is completely in a state of flux. So once again, I'm going to show you how everything has really just completely been taken apart. And we have a lot of things that are pushing and pulling on everything that is going on at this point in time. So our FY20 budget, thinking about closing out the year and our areas of focus, number one is our loss of revenue. The second thought is looking at a strategic shift in the use of our grant funding. You know, how do we pivot? And then also our expense reductions. And so we're really looking at our FY20 with a long-term vision of what is mission critical and what are those effects for FY21 and beyond. So the first set is our loss of revenue. We use all of these accounts as an offset to the current operating budget. The building use revolving, preschool tuitions, international tuitions, our athletic fees, and food service, while it is not an offset to the operating budget, it's supposed to be a self-sustaining program for which now there is no revenue coming in. So again, just a reminder, in terms of our revolving accounts, in FY20, we are using $1.3 million of revenue from our revolving accounts to offset the current FY20 budget. Right now, the current FY21 budget that we had already adopted and was passed by the school committee, we were using an offset of 1.2 million of revenue from these revolving accounts. So this loss of revenue in all of these accounts has a multi-year impact. Not only would it affect FY20, but it'll affect going forward into FY21 and potentially beyond into FY22. So how do we pivot? What is our strategic use of grants? How can we make these monies look different in terms of where our areas of needs? And that is looking at staffing, our professional development, what are our student needs in terms of how have they changed now with building shutdowns, and then tutoring. Now, some of these grants have been automatically extended to become 2-year grants, but some are still ending on June 30th. So this is a list of the grants that we're currently utilizing for FY20. So we need to figure out, of these funds that are unspent, how will we prioritize these needs for student needs after the school closure, and what professional development do we need to provide our staff so that they have the tools that are necessary to address the students going forward. I don't know why it's not letting me advance. Hold, please. Okay, I think it went. So the next area of focus is our reduction of expenses. And that begins with a review of all our contracts. And of course, there's legal implications with any contract that we have out there. Apologize. Time out. Take them. Sorry, apologies. And then, so after looking at contracts, basically what we need to do is shut down services where possible. And look at our purchases as being what is only mission critical. And for services not rendered and not authorized is another place where we can reduce our expenses. So after all that, where are we? In terms of reducing our expenses, the priority one, as I said earlier, is anything we save in FY20, we're looking to cover that loss of revenue first off. So our loss of revenue, what have we looked at? We've taken $73,000 that has been charged to building use, and we've moved that back into the operating against the building and grounds contracted service. Preschool tuitions, the salaries that are paid out of that revolving right now have been moved to the grant with the potential of moving that to the operating budget in the preschool para salary line. $200,000 of teaching expenses that were charged to international tuitions has been moved back into the operating and charged against high school teaching. For the athletic fees, we have not had a spring season, and at this time, we have not paid stipends for the lack of a season. And for food service, right now, we've moved $60,000 into the operating budget to keep this account solvent. However, we need to keep in mind that in that cash account for food service, there is a prepaid liability of $105,000. What that means is people have paid in money to the food service. So for instance, I have $10 sitting on my lunch account. So that's a prepaid liability for which we are holding people's cash. So that's something we need to be cognizant of. Reducing the expenses, the second priority is also anything that we save in FY20, how can we look at FY21 and what are their mission critical one-time purchases? Things such as textbooks, engineering and tech ed, the classroom kits, and classroom furniture. These mission critical items are all driven by enrollment, and no matter what happens with that FY21 budget in terms of funding, these are items that will be needed. So anything that we can save in 20, we can pull out of the 21 budget and make sure that we have these items ready for students come next year. I think that went past. Okay, I apologize, it's kind of skipping slides. So this is the cover sheet of the financial report that you're used to seeing. So at this point in time, we have a positive variance of $375,000. But not at this time also, not all of those FY21 mission critical expenses have been pulled into this number. So this is where we are, and this number will continue to change. So for payroll, we're at a deficit of $80,000, and this deficit comes about in this way. Personnel attrition is a positive variance. We had staff that had stated they would change lanes in the salary grid and did not, so that was a positive. We used less in our salary reserve, but this is the positions that were added due to enrollment, and then some positions that were reduced during this school year, and then all other variances. From our expense accounts, transportation is a positive variance, and that is due to the contract amendment. As I said, we've been reviewing contracts in terms of what can we do, what services are actually being rendered, and where can we negotiate. So this was a positive contract negotiation that we'll actually get into later in the meeting. Athletics expenses, again, there was no spring season, so there were no buses. There were a lot of expenses that were not incurred. Utilities, again, another positive variance. Not only did we have the benefit of building shutdowns, but we also had a very warm winter. So this one has really worked in our favor. We've pulled money back from circuit breaker. because our tuitions balance have had positive changes. Our school committee legal is still a negative variance. The building and grounds contracted service now is that negative variance where we're pulling in to cover that revenue loss. And food service is also a negative variance where we're covering that revenue loss. But that still leaves us with a positive variance of $455,000 in our expense accounts. So as you can see, FY20 is getting closer. We're almost piecing this part of the puzzle together. So as a reminder for FY21, this is the budget that was passed both by the school committee and by the select board. Represented 52 million, an 8.9% increase to the school budget. And again, FY21 is completely up in the air at this point in time. So the economic fallout from COVID-19, the state of Massachusetts could be short $5 billion plus in revenues. The state funding picture is still very much unclear. The federal funding opportunities are still unclear. And from the town CFO, Tim O'Leary, using the last downturn in FY10, the state budget was down 4.4%. That resulted in a local aid drop of 9%. So the town budget of approximately 96 million, about 9 million of that comes from state funding. The health insurance, the original number that we received back from the current vendor was an exorbitant increase. I believe it was 48%. So that is something that is a huge work in progress for the town to figure out that puzzle. Now, originally, with all of this being unclear in terms of the funding, town meeting was delayed until June 23rd with the hope of having better numbers available from the state. But now there's also a potential to push town meeting to be delayed until the end of September. So what does that mean? If town meeting goes until the end of September, what we are able to operate on is what's called 1/12 budgets. And 1/12 budget means that we don't have a budget for FY21 until the end of September. That really leads to staffing uncertainty. As you know, in that 8.9% increase, there were a number of positions that are being proposed to address the increase in enrollment for the kids that are sitting in front of our teachers today. In terms of the Federal CARES Act and what is coming from the federal support, the Massachusetts, the Governor's Fund is anticipated to be 50 million plus an additional 214 million for K-12 educational stabilization. So Massachusetts is in the process of applying for this act. The CARES Act will allow for broad use of the funding. Once the state receives the funding, then applications will be created for the districts to apply. All indications right now are that distributions to the districts will mirror the Title I allocations for 90% of that 241 million, and the remaining 10% will be based on need. The issue for Hopkinton is the Title I allocation for us in FY20 is $59,000. So if we are mirroring Title I allocations of that $241 million, it does not really spell a lot of money for Hopkinton as a potential. So we as at the district level are assuming that the FY21 budget will be reduced. So in terms of strategies, all departments are revisiting their FY21 budget as we speak. The FY21 one-time purchases that can be completed now using FY20 savings is what we are discussing. But we're also keeping an eye to the FY21 reductions that can be made that then don't have to be added back in FY22. Because all indications are that fiscal year 21 is going to be bad and 22 could even be worse. The indications from economic advisors is this could take at least 5 years to climb out of this hole. So it's not a 1-year solution and it's not a 2-year solution. So basically, all of the decisions that we make today will affect tomorrow. So we're watching very closely, and we're really trying to be very cognizant not only of this fiscal budget, but next year and then the year after. But the more we discuss and the more we strategize and the more we learn and try to pivot to address student needs, address staffing in giving them the supports that they need to meet their students where they're at going forward. I do believe that we'll be able to piece this together, but it's going to be a lot of work. And so that is the end of that. Any questions?
So I had a question about going back to the state aid and the mirroring of the Title I. Is that to say that there's an expectation that our percentage of that would be potentially 59,000?
That's correct. The potential allocation, if we're using $59,000 is what our Title I allocation, that may be what we get out of this $241 million.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Are there other questions
I
or
see-
comments from the
I see
committee?
Amanda's hand up.
Amanda?
Sorry, I lost the little part where you could raise your digital hand. Just a couple of process questions, Susan, and thank you for all this. But regarding the timing of the annual town meeting, is that being determined mostly by the availability of information from the state or by the ability to convene as a group because of COVID?
It really is kind of looking at the risk tolerance. So the select board is going to have to determine what the risk tolerance is for trying to put together a budget with very little information from the state. So it's not so much that they're unable to gather the townspeople, but more of not having enough information at the end of June. Of course, at the end of September, the picture would be a lot clearer. So it's just a matter of what that risk tolerance is of passing a budget with very little information coming from the state.
Okay. And another process question. Understanding that everything is moving. So I know that we're just kind of making this up as we get information, but what do we anticipate the process to be from now until, say, September? Assuming that we do have to defer town meeting. I know that as your presentation said, we've asked administrators to look at their 21 budget and look for opportunities and determine where they could potentially make reductions and so forth. How would we, obviously this is a new kind of a budget process for school committee and the community. So how might we see this sort of unfold in terms of, would you anticipate seeing reports back from the different administrators again? And would we have another public hearing when more information is determined and that sort of thing? Do we have any sense of how this might unfold?
Typically in a situation like this, we would come back and we, meaning Dr. Kavanaugh and I, would come back and represent the changes. Having administrators come back and basically restart the process. If you keep in mind, that was almost a month and a half of administrators presenting their budget. So anything that we come up with in terms of reductions and things like that will come from the administrators, but it would be presented most likely by Dr. Kavanaugh and I in terms of what are the changes.
Okay. And just one last clarification on process. So if we don't have a town meeting in time before June 30th, and we do have to go to a 1/12 budget, just checking my understanding here, basically that means that we're going to look at our budget until such a time that we can pass a budget. Our budget has to be assumed to be 1/12 of the previous year's budget. So assuming we had a flat budget and divided it evenly by month throughout the year, we take 1/12 of the fiscal year 20 budget. That was already 9% lower than what we passed with the select board.
Mhm.
So 1/12 of that is what we would have to operate on until we have clarity and a passed budget through another town meeting.
Well, a 1/12 budget, basically what has to happen is the select board on a monthly basis has to actually go and present to DOR what their 1/12 budget is for that month. And that's done each month. Now, there can be fluctuations. For instance, if you have a large debt payment in the month of July, your month of July 1/12 budget can be higher than the month of August.
Okay.
So it can reflect what you actually need to pay. But it is 1/12 of your FY20 budget.
Thank you.
So that would seem like that could pose a number of challenges for us, looking at contractual obligations in addition to the enrollment changes that we based our FY21 budget on. I think that's a larger conversation for another day, but that's, wow, a lot to wrap my brain around.
It is a challenge, for sure. Yeah. It just gets back to any decision that we make now in FY20, it has an impact on FY21, and we have to be very cognizant of those decisions.
Right.
Yeah, and as you are doing a 1/12 budget, you're pretty much living out of the town's free cash. That's really where the majority of your money is coming from to balance your budget until you establish an actual budget.
So when we return in the fall, in terms of hiring and things like that, we have new classrooms that are already passed and coming for the students that we have. We have hopefully potentially teachers in the pipeline who are coming to teach these students. And so in terms of just planning for the administrators for the fall, I guess maybe this isn't a question that can be answered, but just to keep in mind for the folks that are here and for the folks that might be watching, for the administrators to be able to adequately and accurately gauge how many students need to be in a course, in a section, on a team in the middle school, that's going to be, there's an enormous amount of unknown that goes into it if we're living month to month until we pass the budgets that could be significantly less than that which we passed just a couple of weeks ago, right?
That's correct.
Yes, and I think that that's one thing that we keep trying to underscore for our town partners, how difficult it is for a school to do that, because it makes a huge difference in, say, the fourth grade, whether you have 12 classrooms, 13 or 14. So you do need to hire now, and you need to hire now while you're operating on a 1/12 budget. And then there's town meeting in September. So you don't want to hire someone who comes in and works the month of September, and then in October we say, I'm sorry, we can't afford that position any longer. So it really does put a school in a precarious place.
The other side of that would be that it would be very difficult to hire a fourth grade teacher if we determined that if we err on the side of having, say, 12, for example, and we actually, what we feel like we need is 14. If we only hire 12, it would be very difficult to expand that to 14 in September, and we may be stuck with larger class sizes for the year. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. So, and I think as we continue to look at all the different ways that we can save, if we end with a surplus of say $200,000 and it goes back to the town, when it goes back to the town, it goes back into free cash, which then becomes the kind of money that would be the budget from which we work until we actually have one established. So yes, our first priority will be to keep teachers in front of our students. That's absolutely the first, priority all the time.
Can I ask a question, just because I think other people might have it too? How is this going to affect the renovation that's supposed to take place at the high school and the portable classrooms?
So that's a separate, that's a capital article that was passed in November and then an election in February, I believe. So those projects are moving forward. So the high school and the portable classrooms are still on track. The only piece that we keep checking back with really is manufacturing, in terms of whether or not the manufacturers are open and we can get steel and windows and things that we need. But other than that, this operating budget and what we're operating, this difficult situation is not affected by, the construction is not affected by that.
That's great. Thank you.
Good question. Any? I'm sorry, I think I muted myself. Were there any other questions or comments before we move on to the superintendent's report? Okay, seeing none then.
I had one other, if you would indulge me, Nancy. Whoops.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Just kind of following on the financial report. Am I still shared? Am I still screen shared with you?
No,
You aren't, Susan, no.
Okay, hold please.
there you go.
Okay, just to kind of follow up, because Amanda had some questions on the school committee packet, so I just wanted to make sure to get these answers out, because I think they're beneficial for the whole school committee and, the public at large, if they are indeed looking at these packets.
Great, thank you.
So the first question came around the warrant. So in your school committee packet, each time you receive a warrant payable, and that's what's approved, and then part of what the school committee's chair's job and full school committee to approve. So the question was specifically just around the electric for the high school. And these are the ending pages of the warrant. And so the question was, why is the high school amount of $12,000? And why is that so high? And, it doesn't seem to compare to the previous month, and maybe not to the same month of the previous year. So I just want everyone to understand the build of what goes into what you're seeing in that $12,000. So the high school electric account, there's 5 different meters that are hitting that account. You have the solar company, so that is an expense. So that's between $1,000 and $3,700 per month. The main electric service can be anywhere between $10,000 and $17,000 a month. Then you have a pump house, exterior lights, and the parking lot lights. So at any month in the warrant, it can be any combination of one of these 5 or all 5 that hits into this utility line. So that's just kind of a reminder that with high school, you're looking at 5 different meters. And when we receive utility bills, we try to crank them out as fast as possible and get them paid as fast as possible. So in some warrants, you may have all 5 of those meters, and in some warrants, maybe you'll only have 1. So just kind of a heads up with that. The next question was, when you're looking at that same page, I saw you, Amanda, I'll come right back. When you're looking at the same page, the remaining budget doesn't seem to change. And in that case, that is a correct statement. So if you look at, again, it's the electric for the high school. The original budget is 270,000. What has been spent at this point in time is 152. What's been encumbered is 84,000, and the remaining budget is 33,000. What you have in the warrant is that $12,000. And so what that is, it's already encumbered in this in a purchase order. So what's happening when you see a warrant is the encumbered number is being reduced and the amount spent is increasing. So it is correct that the budget number is not changing because it's happening over here. So Amanda, I saw you had your hand up on the previous slide.
I think I've got it. I think I'm good. My question was really, do we have a sense of the 5 accounts when school's in shutdown mode? What is sort of the base level of electricity? We probably haven't experienced it long enough to know, I guess.
Well, and this is the thing, we've really never shut down a school, because even in the summer when we're technically unoccupied, we're not unoccupied. We're doing summer cleaning. There's air conditioning taking care of places where people are working. The offices were running air conditioning. So the buildings are really never not occupied. This is really a first to go into complete shutdown and see what that experience will take us. Now, keep in mind that this was really the March utility bills that you're paying now. April will be really more of that full test, and we won't get that until mid-May.
This was really helpful. Thank you for this explanation.
Good. School lunch. So there were some more questions around school lunch. So to give you an idea, when school's in session, our average daily lunches was over 1,200 per day that we're serving the students. And out of that 1,200 per day, we had potential to submit claims for 285 that were free or reduced. As we shut down the schools, originally, only schools that were designated with the seamless summer option or summer school food service program could claim for those meals. Those are communities, they're free and reduced is well over 40%. So that is not something that Hopkinton has ever been able to do and did not offer. Now, on March 29th, the DESE waiver application to expand the eligibility for providing and claiming those meals for towns like Hopkinton that are outside of that seamless summer, and that was approved by the USDA. In addition, DESE filed about 15 other waivers. So in other words, where can you serve those meals? Can you give dinners? Can you give meals that will take families through the weekend? So there was a whole multitude of waivers that DESE filed on behalf of communities to really allow us to continue to address people with food insecurity as best as possible. So getting back to the daily lunches where we were serving over 1,200 a day, now we're preparing about 100 a week. So we're down to 20 a day. And we're providing those through Project Just Because. Now, it's still unclear, even of those that we're providing now during the shutdown, what is the date that the USDA is allowing communities to go back for in terms of claiming. So while the claiming is nominal, when you're looking at 20, we don't know if it's March 29th. We don't know if it's when schools actually shut down. Like we don't have that direction yet. So that's really changed in terms of what we can and cannot do. And similar to the financial presentation, everybody's waiting on the rules. So a lot of things have been put in place, and we're waiting on the rules. We're waiting on the applications. So there are a lot of things that are still very much unclear in terms of what's happening. So the other question was around revenue, and what are all our sources of revenue? So this is a snapshot of the P&L. So keep in mind that the profit and loss is based on sales. So if somebody comes through the lunch line and gets a lunch, it's a sale. So these are where we were at the end of 2019. And this is where we will end 2020. So at this point in time, we're looking at a loss from a profit and loss standpoint of over $281,000. And it really just comes down to the fact that we're losing 4 months of students, teachers, and a la carte sales just out the window. So again, and then you look at the other side, the cash balance. So the cash balance that you see in the revolving account that is put forward in the financial report. So the cash balance consists of the sales if cash changes hands, plus all those other revenue accounts. So if a student comes through the line and comes up and is going to buy lunch, but does not have the cash on either on their account or to pay, the sale still happens, but no cash changes hands. So it will look like a sale in that profit and loss, but that student then has a negative balance in their personal account. And that's what the Lunch Heroes is really aiming at. So, you know, say I'm a student and I didn't have money for lunch. I now have a negative balance in my lunch account. When people are making those donations to Lunch Heroes, they're paying off my balance. So I no longer have that bill hanging over my head. So when I go back to school, my balance is now zero. So that's what the Lunch Heroes is aimed at. So in terms of expenses, those consist of your salaries, the food costs, the non-food costs, paper goods, and equipment. Now, obviously, we have not purchased food since the shutdown. What we have been doing is providing our existing inventory. So we've provided over $1,500 of inventory to Project Just Because. And some of our inventory has just been thrown away. It was perishable or the shelf life, it was done. So again, just getting back with the school lunch, the real issue is that loss of revenue, not having sales for the last 4 months of the school years is really what's put us in a difficult situation with that. And it's not just us, it's across the state. So hopefully I covered your questions, Amanda. And if anybody else had questions based on those.
Thank you. That was excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. That was really great. Very helpful.
Okay, it's all yours.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions from the committee, that would move us into the next item on the agenda, which is the superintendent's report from Dr. Kavanaugh.
Okay, thank you. I will also try to grab the screen. All right, and I assume you can see my screen there now? Yes? Great, thank you.
Yes.
So this is the superintendent's report for April 30th, 2020, and it's really just an update on all of the things that are happening in our school. I thought I would start with this image, and while it might seem very COVID-19, it did appear in the Commissioner's weekly update. So what was really nice about this is that the Commissioner of Education was noticing Doug Scott And the group of students that he has pretty much now got making shields, like nationwide, the work that they are doing coming out of Hopkinton High School is amazing. So because I saw it in the commissioner's report, I thought it was probably worthy of putting here on our cover page for the report of April 30th. So thank you to Mr. Scott. And these are all the places where his shield team is now producing and distributing masks. Pretty great. All right, so what is new in the Hopkinton Public Schools? We currently have plans underway for redesigning graduation. That is the work of Mr. Bishop, his assistant principals, and I know he's been working very, very closely with members of the class of 2020. There's probably no class that has been more cheated in the spring of their senior years in the class of 2020. And so anything we can do to restore some kind of normalcy or celebrate those students and all of their achievements, we are certainly trying to do that. So thank you to Mr. Bishop and all the work that he's doing with kids. Our grade 12 students, so all of our seniors who, any senior, statewide who may not have yet passed MCAS in any subject. That was the one area where there was still some question about, what would happen with the MCAS test. Would those kids need to have a competency determination? But they have just recently, in the last couple of days, decided that if a student who was missing a competency determination in any subject area, math, ELA, or science, if they passed a grade 12 course in those subject areas, they would be entitled to a diploma. Any family who is still in need of food assistance or who has become food needy should reach out to our food service director, Michelle Babin, or you can reach out directly to Project Just Because. They are, as I've said, every time we've met, working very closely together. Anytime you are interested in what's happening in our public schools, please feel free to tune into HCAM. They are doing HCAM Hangouts, and so you'll very frequently see school-related broadcasts, and obviously all of our meetings will be broadcast remotely there as well. I would encourage families to remember that our fields are closed. That's really important for you to remember at this time. I know that we still have kids using the fields at the high school, but just as importantly, we have families who want to use the playgrounds at Marathon, Hopkins, Elmwood, and that's really nice to be able to get your families outside. I certainly understand that, but when multiple children start playing on those playgrounds together, we are certainly not practicing social distancing. So all of our fields, every school, they are closed and they have to be. And then one final thing I would like for the community to remember is that Kidsborough aftercare will be in all 3 of our elementary schools next year. So when we start talking about the transportation policy this evening, please know that if you have a child in Marathon, Elmwood, or Hopkins, your child will be able to attend aftercare in that very building. I'm hoping that that will help people with their fall planning. All right, one other thing that I thought was really important to point out, and we say all the time that we don't want to live and die by statistics, but US News and World Report just released the rankings of high schools in Massachusetts, and you can see that Hopkinton High School came in 3rd. Boston Latin is an exam school. Sturgis Charter is a charter school. So I am really pleased for Mr. Bishop and his team and for all of the other schools that prepare kids along the way. I am really proud that Hopkinton High School has been listed as sort of really the #1 public high school, but 3rd in the state. So congratulations to the high school and to all of our administrators and teachers and paraprofessionals, nurses, all of our staff. We could never, ever do it without you. So thank you. We had not had an update on enrollment in quite a while, and because we're getting close to the end of the year, I thought it might be important to show that. When we created the budget for this year, the budget was based on 113 additional students. Our net at this point in time is 189 students. So we are way ahead of where we thought. And you had been seeing those kinds of numbers all the way through. So I'm sure that you saw that in February as well. Those numbers have been pretty much unchanging. But what we are starting to see now is kids enrolling for the 2021 school year. So in terms of kindergarten for next year, We have 167 students who have been approved for enrollment, and we have 27 students who are pending enrollment. That simply means that we're just waiting for pieces of paperwork before we move them over to the other column. So we're somewhere just under 200 kindergarten kids, and it's, tomorrow will be May 1st. So there is the possibility that that kindergarten class could grow quite large over time. And then other enrollments, non-kindergarten students, we have only approved 16 at this point for next year. But I think if we look historically at what happened last year, we did have enrollments trickling in all through the summer. But typically what does happen is somewhere around August 1st, parents start to realize, oh my, it's August 1st, we should really get our kids enrolled in the public schools. And so then you have that onslaught. It's typically about 2.5 weeks where just loads and loads of families are enrolling their students. So we'll keep an eye on that, as we always do. Remote instruction, how is it going? Before moving on to the next slide, one thing that I will say is I have had superintendents in other very high performing districts reach out and say that what they are hearing from their parents, from their faculty, is that Hopkinton right now is the high water mark. And again, I don't want you to think that I am taking credit for this, because I genuinely believe that it is our administration, it's our teachers, the paraprofessionals, all of those people who work on the curriculum side of things. They are making this happen. And it's just with deep care for children and for their learning. So again, thank you to all of those people. I was in an online classroom the other day, and it was really pretty amazing what I could see there. What you see on the screen right now is one of our third grade teachers, and she started with a little math warm up. So she just hold up 2 playing cards, and the kids would have to multiply them. They could raise their hand, the paraprofessional would unmute them, and the child could say what the product was of those 2 numbers. From there, she went right into a whiteboard activity and a video activity, and they were working on equivalent fractions. While she was doing that, she kept stressing the commutative property, the importance of kids putting in as much effort as possible, and she continued to ask them to think about different ways to solve. That remote learning experience was the exact same thing that you would have seen in a classroom, except that it was delivered through technology. And I couldn't help myself but be super proud of what I saw in that classroom. And to be honest with you, very much amazed at what I saw in that classroom. The kids were all attentive. They're sitting in front of ironing boards. They're sitting in, beanbag chairs, and yet they are all really attentive to the learning. Here is the video that she used for equivalent fractions, just a quick screenshot. Some of the other things that are happening remotely, this is the front page of the middle school's student scoop that they're putting out. And you can see in the headline, extracurriculars return to HMS despite continuation of remote learning. So when we wonder, gee, are our kids engaged in, some of the clubs that they used to be? Yes, we are pushing those out remotely as well. And finally, what you see on this slide are the counseling services at the high school. I have stolen a quote from Lisa Winner, who is the HHS START program teacher. Self-care is as critical as air, water, and food. And so I think that we are balancing the extracurriculars, the social emotional wellness of our kids, and the academic wellness of our kids. We're doing a really good job. And so again, all I can say is I am so proud of administrators, teachers, paraprofessionals, nurses, custodians, admin assistants, and all of the other staff in the Hopkinton Public Schools. Thank you. All right, now here's the dismal slide. You could see in all of the things that Mrs. Rothermick just presented to you that our FY budget in FY21 is just an entire redo at this point. When, I know that you have received an awful lot of email today from people who are parents and students of the spring athletes, and it has been very challenging. And I want the committee to know and the public to know that we have engaged with those coaches in some kind of negotiation, because it is our belief that they care very deeply for our kids. And we would like to be able to recognize that monetarily. But by the same token, when we take a look at where the athletics budget is. And, our children, our students who are student athletes, they did not this spring pay their athletics fees. And, it wouldn't be right to ask students to be paying for a service that wasn't rendered. So as we kind of think about that, is there additional money in athletics? Yes, there's transportation money there, but essentially that money is money that belongs, I believe, in my fiduciary responsibility to the community, to the entire community. And so if it's money that is, or portions of that money, or portions of any aspect of this budget that we are able to return to the town to go back into free cash, I think that that's sort of where we were coming from in our decision making. As Mrs. Rothermick said, if we look at what is projected for FY21, we do not know how much money we would be getting in state aid in the town of Hopkinton, but $9 million is an awful lot of money. And I don't feel like at this point in time, I could take transportation money and just sort of put that out there without considering the fiscal wellness of the entire community and what next year will look like in terms of putting teachers in front of children. So we are certainly willing to continue negotiations with the coaches around honoraria. And obviously I can't share any of the content of that because that would be not bargaining in good faith. But I think that, as I have chosen this particular image, it doesn't just have to do with athletics. You know that our entire budget for FY21 sort of looks like this right now. And if I could have a wish, it would be that we would have a budget in place by June 30th, 2020, so that we weren't living with a 112 budget, so that we had some sense that things would be a little bit more concrete. But I'm not necessarily sure that my wish will come true, and I'm not necessarily sure we have a crystal ball that will predict what FY21 will look like. But as Mrs. Rothermick very articulately stated tonight, FY21 is going to impact FY22. So I think we have a few years of very hard budgets in front of us, and I'm just trying to be as cautious as I can be with taxpayer dollars. So, and as always, we will end with questions.
Anyone questions? Amanda?
I just want to say a quick comment on the ranking. And I'm super, super proud of the high school. It's a place that my kids have thrived in, and I'm very thankful for the high school. But I just want to say that when you have a 12th grader, you've been all the way through, the sort of the K to 12 journey becomes a lot clearer. And you realize that all those accolades that the high school gets really do start at the beginning. And, I think that when our district earns that kind of recognition, I don't want to forget to acknowledge the elementary schools and the middle school, because it's the preparation, it's the teamwork, it's the handoffs between schools, the way that, Elmwood and Hopkins work together, and Marathon and Elmwood work together, and we work across the elementary schools together. So I just think it's great. I love our high school, but I definitely see it as a piece of the puzzle, and really the credit goes, I think, to the whole district as well. So
I agree with that.
Thank you for saying that.
Okay. There are no other comments or questions. Am I not missing anyone from the committee? Am I? Because I don't have a full thing. We can move into the next item on the agenda, which is the school committee chair report. And as you know, I am standing in for our chair, Mina, at this time, and I have approved payroll warrant S20021 and S20022. The warrants have been included in your packets. I have also approved warrants 20-053, 20-054, 20-055, and 20-056. Also, all of those are in your packet. Just with regard to, I know that we received a fair amount of communication but from the last meeting to this meeting, a lot of it today, obviously with regards to the spring coaches, which Dr. Kavanaugh has addressed. We also did receive, I think everybody saw some comments on the transportation. I think it is helpful that, as Dr. Kavanaugh had also pointed out, that we will have all 3 schools having after-school care next year for our elementary schools. I also had the opportunity to meet with the Budget Advisory Committee, and that's, as you know, with our town partners and with Dr. Kavanaugh and Susan Rotherman, and it pretty much from them got the exact same thing that has already been presented by both Susan and Dr. Kavanaugh. I also had the Senate President Spilka's office reach out to me to check to see how we're doing, and also really just to say that while they're holding us in the concerns that we all have on our budget, but that they are not able to in good conscience give us any better sense of what we've already had on the state money until they have more of a sense on what the state's getting from federal. So we're not really, I don't have any more inside scoop on that than what we have already had. So with that, are there any liaison reports? Anybody have anything? I know some of that settled down. Oh, Amanda, go ahead.
Just a quick one from the HOP Coalition. So we met this week, and like everyone else, I think we've already heard the dismal fiscal news, but the grant money that was earned by the HOP Coalition to be used to help prevent substance misuse among our youth in particular has to be spent by the end of the year. Unfortunately, a large portion of that was going to go toward the post-prom party and the prom busing. Last year, they provided busing for all prom attendees. So because of the timing, the prom has now been moved to November. There's a very, very slim likelihood that we're going to be able to find any way from the HOP Coalition to use this year's earmark. So it's unlikely that there will be an earmark next year. So that was unfortunate news, but the coalition is brainstorming what can be done and how we can support the prom, ourselves or through other efforts. So there's that bad news. On the plus side, they are working with some of our members who come to the HOP Coalition are some of the guidance folks and administrators at the high school. And there's a strong communication there, looking for any ways that we can help with the earmark for this year before the end of June to support the high school or the middle school in anything that they're doing right now. If there's an opportunity for us to use some of our funds to support mental health in particular among our youth between now and the end of June, they're sort of open to those ideas. And I think Mr. Bishop and Mrs. Elder are working on that and seeing if there's anything they want to bring forward. So.
Thank you, Amanda. Anybody
Just
else? Go ahead.
Sorry, Nance, I'm talking over you. Yeah, I have a quick, especially in light of the enrollment numbers that we just saw, and we're just a few students shy of 4,000. The growth study committee has not met, but there's been a lot of discussion about how and when to continue their work. A lot of the work was done in sort of smaller subgroups and then was going to be brought back to the committee as a whole. So I think that there are still groups working on their small pieces and trying to gather data and compile information for the community. But it's in a little bit like many things in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. But they are still, working to try and schedule some way to meet. So we'll see how far out that is, but I just wanted to kind of update everybody that it's still there. It's just in a little bit of a holding pattern.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Any comments, reports? Okay, with seeing none, did anybody have an update on the office hours? Don't know if we wanted to. Okay. All right, then having nothing there, we can move into our first item of new business, which is the Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship. And that's you, Dr. Kavanaugh.
Thank you. So the Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship, we actually do this annually. I am requesting that the school committee will authorize payment from the town treasurer for the Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $500. And this is really just a perfunctory matter. I think you've muted yourself, Nan.
Sorry, thank you. So is there a motion then to authorize payment from the town treasurer for the Lou and Kathy White Memorial Scholarship in the amount of $500?
So moved.
So that is a motion by Jen. And did I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Meg, and we will do a roll call, starting with you, Meg,
Aye.
and Jen,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
and I am also an aye, and so that passes, and that moves us into the next item, which is the Lunch Heroes donation. Also, Dr. Kavanaugh.
All right, thank you. You know that whenever a monetary or something of monetary value is offered to the Hopkinton Public Schools, it has to formally be accepted by the school committee. And so we have received Lunch Heroes donations that total $1,350, and I am looking for the committee to accept those donations.
So before we take a vote on that, I wanted to make a comment because this is the third meeting, I think, in a row where we have had very generous donations
Yeah.
for the Lunch Heroes program. And I think that's very moved by the community spirit that we have in seeing people step up to help in a time when a lot of people I know are probably struggling more with food insecurity. I had a question on the Lunch Heroes. Is there a possibility? I know we've been looking at kind of clearing some of these accounts out for kids that come with that don't have money for lunch in the moment, but is there a possibility that we could discuss going forward into the fall? Our free and reduced lunch program, I know, has federal guidelines that we follow in order to take the federal money, but where we're having money coming into the Lunch Heroes donation, would it be possible to alter the threshold at which we're allowing kids to have free and reduced lunch and fund it through the donations?
Susan, I think that's probably a question for your department.
Yeah, so right now, as you can imagine, the kind of the focus is on the students that have balances that are already free and reduced. And so the way that kids that end up with a balance, so if for instance, if I'm on free lunch, but I wanted a water, so the water is not covered by that free lunch program. So that water, the charge for that water does end up on my account. But obviously, if I'm already qualified for free lunch, I probably don't have the money to pay for that water either. So the focus of these donations really is to clear the accounts for these families. So, again, they don't have these bills hanging over their heads. But we certainly can, depending on the value that, if this Lunch Heroes program takes off, we certainly can look at this as a pool of money for financial assistance that can be used for lunch for students that do not qualify according to the federal guidelines, as you say, for various reasons, but still have food insecurity and is there a way that we can provide for them? So this fund absolutely could be a way, if we have growth in it, it certainly can be an avenue that we can look at. Sure.
Thank you. That it answers exactly what I'm looking at. I'm thinking at also just the down the road, this might continue to grow and people might want to support thinking about all of those people that are kind of in that gap between who qualifies for free and reduced lunch and then other people who also related to the COVID pandemic maybe, or other reasons may be experiencing financial hardship, but just simply don't qualify because of either sudden illness, sudden job loss, sudden different things that would shift things. So thank you.
Yeah.
I apologize for the diversion from what actually is here on the agenda. But so is there a motion to accept? Are there any other questions before I look for a motion? Okay. Then is there a motion to accept the donation for the Lunch Heroes in the amount of $1,350?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Then we will do a roll call again, and I will start with you, Meg,
Aye.
and Jen,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
and I am also an aye, and it is unanimous and so carries. And so that brings us into item C, which is the transportation contract.
Thank you. So across the state, as we're looking at all the contractual obligations that every district is in, transportation was one that is obviously common and a very large part of the any district's budget. So all of us that use Connolly all grouped together, and this is what happened across the state. So that we really could be a united front in terms of how we negotiate with our vendors. So all of us that use Connolly grouped together, and we negotiated with Connolly Bus basically around the aspects of service that are still occurring. So such as maintaining the buses. They bought the buses, they're paying for the insurance. So really just kind of looking at what their ongoing operating costs, net of any state or federal support that is available. And this has resulted in changing our daily rate from $386 per day down to $190 per day. So we're looking at a reduction of 51%. So the the lower rate is what we will pay for the remainder of the school days while school has been closed. And basically what this does is this rate will allow for continuity of service for Connolly for when the district, when we do reopen. But Connolly is still absorbing a substantial loss because obviously we're not doing the field trips, the athletic trips, and all of those is really where a lot of their margin comes from. But Connolly has not asked districts to pay even any portion of those. So we're really just looking at the day rate. And again, the negotiations, and this is for all of us that use Connolly, so it's a united reduction. So the reduction is 51%. So we would only be paying 49% of that rate. So I'm looking for the committee to approve that amendment to our current contract.
So moved.
Oh, sorry, there's a motion by Meg. Does anybody else have a comment or want to make a second on that?
So I have a one quick question that's come up a couple of times, and I think we received an email about it, and I know it's kind of unrelated, but I think it ties in with this. Susan, the idea of whether or not the bus drivers are being compensated during this time when they're not driving the buses. And I know they're Connolly employees, not Hopkinton Public School employees. But I think, tying into the fact that we're still going to be paying 49%, maybe do you have any knowledge or that could maybe answer the question that the community posted earlier today? I think we had a couple emails about it.
So it's interesting that the community is asking, but the drivers are not. The drivers are actually very well taken care of. So Connolly is not paying them. They are on unemployment, but they also qualify for that additional money that you can collect through unemployment. So if you notice through all the comments, I don't believe you're getting complaints from drivers themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Then I'll second Meg's motion.
Okay, then
I just had a quick
Go ahead, Amanda.
follow-on question. So to our knowledge, we will have the same bus drivers next year. I mean, to whatever, I mean, we don't control that, but as far as we know, there hasn't been like a massive layoff versus like a furlough or something.
So in the summer, drivers all go on unemployment anyway. So this is not a new process for driving. It's of course it's earlier in the year, but there are those extra monies that are being applied to people that are laid off through the COVID-19. There's additional funding that is out there. So when the school district does call drivers back, and you refuse, you do have difficulty with unemployment. So now that said, that doesn't mean that a driver could get another job somewhere else. So, you know, in this economy, there are no guarantees. We don't have anything in writing saying that 100% of our drivers will come back. We don't have any reason to believe that they wouldn't come back. But, you know, I mean, these are personal decisions that we have no control over.
I
Thank
think it speaks to the fact that a lot of folks really, you know, they love their bus drivers. So
Absolutely.
right,
They do.
exactly.
I'm hoping they all come back. You know, families all hope that as well. But again, you know, people have to do what is right for them personally and their families. And so what a driver decides, you know, is a very personal decision of which we have no control.
Of course.
Sure.
And if I can just throw one more thing on top of that, I did hear from the bus dispatcher that the drivers really miss the kids. So I hope that that makes families feel good because the drivers are missing their children.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it's lovely.
So we have a motion and a second. So I'm going to go ahead and do a roll call, and I'm going to start with you, Meg,
Aye.
Jen,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
and I am also a yes. So that passes, and we moves us into the next item on the agenda, which is parking fees.
Okay, I just need to make sure I wasn't muted. So the current parking fee is $155 for high school students, juniors and seniors. And that was the same as the bus fee. So the committee had voted to increase the bus fee to $200. And the parking fee and the bus fee have always been the same. And the reason is, you know, basically the National Highway Traffic Safety states that traveling in a school bus is the safest form of transportation. So the district has always kept these fees the same because we do not want to create a financial incentive for young drivers to be getting behind the wheel as opposed to being in the bus, which is really a safer way. So the recommendation is for the parking fee to continue to match the bus fee.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions on that? Okay. Seeing none, I would seek a motion to approve the increased parking fee to $200.
So moved.
Motion by Meg. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jen. We'll do a roll call starting with you, Meg.
Aye.
Jen,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
and I am also a yes, so that is unanimous, and the parking fees will be adjusted appropriately for FY21. So that brings us then into the item F, which is the FY 2020 to 2021 school calendar revision. Dr. Kavanaugh.
So this is just, I feel like we're always talking about the school calendar, but this is just a very quick revision, and I don't know that we have much wiggle room with it. But we will need to change the calendar so that Monday, September 14th will be listed as a holiday to accommodate the Boston Marathon for 2020 that was not run in April. And what the BAA has assured us is that when we come to school on the 15th of September, that the grounds will be all cleared up and we'll be able to open our doors without any problem for our kiddos to come back. And they have also assured us that in the event that they aren't able to run this iteration of the marathon because of COVID-19, this will be the sort of the final opportunity to do that, and they will not reschedule it for 2020. They'll just move on to April of 2021. So just looking for the committee to approve the revised calendar to include Monday, September 14th as a holiday for the Boston Marathon.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion by Meg.
So I just wanted to point out, and I need to double check this now that I'm thinking about it, but does this change our last day of school too? I mean, I suspect it does, right? I can't remember if I saw that or not.
It does.
Yeah. Okay. All right. All right. So just another point to keep in mind for all of us who made plans. All right. I'll second Meg's.
Great. So we'll go roll call, starting with you, Meg,
Aye.
Jen,
Yes.
Amanda.
Aye.
And I also a yes, and so that is unanimous and so moves as well. That brings us back to old business. We will start with item A, which is policy EEAA, transportation services. This is the third reading.
Okay, because this is the third reading, I will just quickly address the one change that we have made in this version of the policy that was not there the last time we read it. And if you are looking in your packet, you will see that there is yellow highlighted text under bus stops. And the portion that we added reads, bus stops will be located at places where students may be loaded and unloaded, cross roadways, and await arrival of buses with the utmost safety allowed by road conditions. And we felt it was important to do that because we had heard from several people in the community that they had concerns about the locations of bus stops. And so we added that in. But the other thing that you'll see in your packets tonight are 3 procedures that go along with that. And we have added these in there, not because the school committee votes on procedure, they only vote on policy, but just to ensure the public that we have thought about the ways that bus routes are determined. So that one is EEAA Procedure 1. EEAA Procedure 2 is the Hopkinton School Committee Bus Stop Appeal Procedure. The bus stop appeal procedure has been in place for a long time, but including this written procedure just kind of codifies that and gives people easy access to the form to fill out. And then EEAA PRC 3, which is the third procedure added. And that one is just afternoon bus flexibility, which allows our kids who are secondary students, 6 to 12, to hop on any bus after school as long as they are not a huge crowd of kids and there's availability on the bus. And it allows kids K to 5 to be able to get off at a different stop with a note from their parents, as long as it's on the same bus that they are typically traveling. And that's been in place for a very long time, but it used to be part of policy, and we felt it was more fitting to consider that a procedure. So those are the 3 pieces that are on top of this particular policy. And the big change to the policy is only that a student gets 1 morning pickup location and 1 afternoon pickup location, largely driven by economics, really.
So I would ask just to defer to, before I make any questions, if there were anything from the policy working group that you guys wanted to add.
One thing, Dr. Kavanaugh, did you mention, you did, I'm sorry, the PRC 1 as well? I feel like I missed that. Did you mention the bus route determination piece that that policy we also added?
I did, yes.
Okay.
I indicated that that would be procedure.
Right, correct. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
So
Go ahead. Sorry, Nancy.
No, you go.
Well, I just wanted to just make a quick statement about this policy, because I think that even though the school committee doesn't necessarily steer a lot, well, we don't steer the procedures. We have been working with the administration here, and they've been very gracious in letting us stick our nose sort of where it technically doesn't belong, and have been very, very accommodating for Amanda and me, and in our attempt to respond to the community and all of the concerns that have been brought forth by the community about this policy. So I think the creation of these 3 procedures, the procedures were already there. It's just that now they're spelled out, and in the interest of making things easy to find, they're available. If someone has a question about it, it's right there. I think too that we also have to keep in mind, we also approved in our last meeting EEAEC in the interest of safety, which talked about safety on the bus, which was another big issue that came up. So I do want to just tell the folks who have brought concerns that we have heard you, and that the administration has been very gracious working with the policy working group, Amanda and me. We spent the last 4 months researching policies of other districts. We've looked at Mass General Law. We've looked at MASC policy samples. We looked at DESE recommendations. And I think that tonight, the policy that we put forth here really is a good one. We've taken out the procedures, but the procedures are all linked. I think that this is a good one. I think I'm recommending that we definitely pass this one. Last week I was on the fence. This week I say we need to make it happen. I think it really serves the students and the families of school-age children, but I also think it is a fiscally responsible policy for the people in the community who don't have kids in the schools. We are no longer paying for a transportation policy that was great to have when we had a much smaller student population, but the population is growing, and I don't think that we're in a position where we can have 5 morning pickups and 5 afternoon drop-off locations. So in response, the administration said, fine, or maybe this happened by accident, it was a happy accident, but now we have childcare at all 3 elementary schools. So families can choose to let their children go to childcare after school in the building where they are, or they can take the bus home, and they have that option. So I do think that this is something that has been really, really vetted, thoroughly vetted. And the last piece I think that's really important that needs to be said is that this is absolutely a partnership transportation between the families and the schools. I think that we just have to keep in mind that, as a family, our responsibility is the safety and the care of our children until they get on the bus. The school's responsibility is the safety and the care of the children from the minute they get on the bus to the minute they get off the bus at the end of the day. And then we transfer that safety and security back to the family. So I think this policy recognizes that partnership. And I'm really happy with the work that's been done over the last 4 months. And I'm really grateful for such a flexible and agreeable administration to let us kind of put our faces and efforts into places where maybe they didn't belong, but that was okay. It all worked out in the end. So I really, really think this is a good piece of work.
Well, I want to say thank you to you as well. I do think that we've worked very hard for a long time, so thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to second everything that Jen just said. You said it very well. I think there's really not much more to say. I think you touched upon a couple of the comments that we got from the community for this go around were some questions about the confusion about when you use after school care and if that counts as your bus stop for the afternoon, so to speak. And it does if you're using the on-site care where your child goes to school, just to say it again, because it has been confusing, it is a change. If you're using that on-site care, you can still pick one afternoon bus destination for Monday through Friday. So the other thing I'm trying to think of, that was the main. I think there was a typo in our procedure document, but that was pretty much I think what we heard this go around. Jenna, is that right?
Yeah, that was it. I know I couldn't believe 3 pairs of eyes on that document, and still we had a typo. I was like, you got to be kidding me. 2 English teachers looking at that document. That's great. I know. Yeah.
Meg, did you have a question?
I just wanted to say I was so glad that you included the phrasing about allowing for the utmost safety, allowing by road conditions. So I appreciated that.
I had received just one additional question, which is, were the after-school providers that are off-site notified that this change was being made just because they're starting to enroll? So it would be, maybe if they have not been notified already, important for them to know as they're collecting enrollment from parents for the fall. So anyway. No, if there are no more comments, then I would look for a motion. I think we're ready to vote on this. Motion, if there's a motion to approve policy EEAA transportation services.
So moved.
Motion by Jen. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Meg. We'll do a roll call starting with you, Meg.
Aye.
Jen?
Yes.
Amanda?
Aye.
And I am also a yes, so that is unanimous and so moves. That brings us then into future agenda items. Anybody have anything? Okay. Then that brings us up for our next opportunity for public comment. If there is anybody from the public, I know there are some public participants here who would like to speak. If you could raise your hand there's a little hand raised button over on the thing, and we can have you unmuted so that you can make your comments. Okay, so I don't see any. Does anybody see any hands? I'm not seeing any. I just want to make sure I'm not. Okay. In that case, we will move into items by consensus.
As superintendent, I recommend that the school committee approve the items by consensus as outlined in your agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Jen,
Second.
second by Meg. We'll do a roll call starting with you, Meg.
Aye.
Jen,
Yes.
Amanda.
Aye.
I am also a yes, so that also passes. And then that brings us down to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So motion by Jen. Is there a second?
Yes, there's a second.
Second by Meg, and we will do a roll call.
Aye.
Starting with Jen,
Yes.
Amanda,
Aye.
and I am also a yes. So we are adjourned at 8:41. And our next meeting is May 14, 2020 at 7 p.m. And it says the location is TBD, but I suspect we will be on Zoom until further notice. And I believe we're also going to have an executive session at that meeting is what we had discussed. So thank you all. And thank you for my patience with the Zoom. Have a good night and stay safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thanks.
you.